exactly glad, but it's nice to be speaking to you in a place that exemplifies or is exemplified by ideals that are in ever great need around the world. I'm not going to present myself as an expert on this. If I was going to title this talk, I would title it Everything I Learned About the Summer of 1916 During the Winter of 2016. I did have the privilege to be selected as the guest curator for this exhibition. I also want to point out that John McDonough, the executive director of the Bogan Monument in Provincetown Library, is here. I'm hoping all of you are going to see this exhibition. So I'm not going to lead you through everything that's in the exhibition. It's actually very informational. After promising to do a kind of a low-text exhibition for John, I got very, very involved with this material, and there's a lot of information in the show, and I hope you all get to see it. And what I thought I would do tonight more was a little bit presentation that takes place almost on either side of the actual exhibition that's installed in the gallery, and talk a little bit about my process and the experience that I had this winter, the first winter I've ever spent any significant time in Provincetown. I always think of the exhibit development process in terms of systems and things like parallel lines or intersections or things that weave together. And obviously in 1916, the Hawthorne School had been in operation for 17 years. There were 3 or 4 other schools in Provincetown. There was a growing number of important journalists and writers, other kinds of intellectuals who were visiting Provincetown annually in the summer, and many important people who were already living here. There was obviously the World War I created an enormous influx of other artists, people who would normally have been traveling to Europe, and that's another thing I think a lot about, is there was a lot of transatlantic mobility, and sort of a surprising amount of people really went to Europe to either for sort of traditional reasons, studying in traditional art colonies, or because they were involved with new things that were going on in Europe and European modernism and so forth. But so there was a huge influx of that, and there was also World War I and really what it signified and how it really transformed a lot of the world, and that from the very, very beginning of this project, I really wanted to sort of emphasize not that people were kind of taking refuge or hiding in Provincetown or fiddling while Rome burned, but actually that many of the people that were here during that time were people who played a really important part on the world stage. But the reason so this is the kind of introduction, the poster or postcard image for the exhibition. It goes from left to right: Marsden Hartley, Marguerite Zorak, Jack Reed, and Susan Glaspel. But the real reason I'm showing this to you is this is a piece that was art directed by Stephen Borkowski and executed by our graphic designer, Dawn. One thing I really want to do is figure out how to say her last name. Similes, okay. Thank you, before I was standing here. So you'll learn in terms of my process, when you're working with good people and they're doing a good job on something, you let them do it. And I was really pleased with the way that this turned out. And there's Stephen. Stephen was the kind of most I really like this stand. This is Stephen Borkowski, who was the person who I really who has been playing in this exhibition and putting material together for it for a very, very long time. And we're going to talk more about him. And this is my parents, Joyce and Bill Tager, who are here tonight. And Joyce and Bill Tager first spent the summer of 1949 in Provincetown separately. Didn't meet until the fall of 1949 in Cambridge, but purchased the house at 564 Promotion Street in 1967. This is the Susan Glaspel house. This was the house that was lived in by Susan Glaspel and Jake Cook, and where we believe we have a School of Peter Hunt cobbler's bench depicting the first reading of Bounties for Cardiff in our living room. Joyce and Bill have been very, very good stewards of this house. And when you read historical accounts of the layout of the house and the arrangement of the rooms, it's really exactly like it was in 1916. And theater historians often come and visit the house, and it really looks a lot like it did then. This is the Peabody Museum at Harvard, where I work. I've worked at this museum for about 25 years, doing example of how well I learned. I think my father still knows more about anthropology, paleontology, ethnology, and certainly natural history than I do. But this is my home museum, and this is a museum that was founded in 1866, and we're actually in the process of developing programming in a major exhibition to celebrate, or not celebrate exactly, but to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the Peabody. The Peabody is the oldest anthropology museum in the world. It was founded to collect the material of the vanishing Native American people. The idea was that because the tribes in North America were vanishing, at least we could collect their material, and this was an idea that was carried into Africa in the period preceding World War I and the Pacific Islands in the period preceding World War II. And so it's a huge collection of ethnographic and archaeological material, much of which departs from the great age of expedition archaeology, where you would go to these countries and sign excavation agreements and then often bring back 50% of everything that was excavated to the Peabody. Peabody has huge holdings of North, Central, and South American material, African and Oceanic material, and one of the largest collections in the world of Native American ethnographic material. And this is an exhibition that's currently installed in the gallery called Piata, and it's an exhibit that we curated based on the discovery of this war book that's in the upper left. When I do presentations at libraries or work on projects with libraries, I like to focus a little bit on books, and I'm going to do that tonight. This is a war book that was discovered in a funerary context on the day after the Battle of the Little Bighorn, along with huge bags of mail. And we studied it for about 10 years and learned that it had been owned collectively by a warrior society made up of Lakota and Northern Cheyenne warriors who all drew in it. And most of the drawings depicted events that took place during Red Cloud's War. And but there are other things. In the lower right-hand corner, there's actually an image of a man and woman wrapped up in a blanket together, and that's an image of courtship. But we decided we wanted to organize an exhibition around this, and so we worked. This is Butch Thunderhawk. Butch Thunderhawk's a very, very important Lakota scholar and artist, and we've had the pleasure to work with him on a couple of projects. And he worked with us to design and curate this exhibition, and this is actually an effigy stick. One of the things that was depicted in this ledger volume was the exploits of this very, very well-known blue roan horse, and it was eventually killed, and he created sort of an effigy element for the horse. We also have the only Native American collection of material collected by Lewis and Clark. And so that, the museum was founded in the 1860s, but this material was collected in 1804 through 6. So often, even very, very early collections have a really, really interesting provenance. All the Native American material that Lewis and Clark collected went to Monticello, and then went to the Peel Museum, and then was purchased by P.T. Barnum, and eventually ended up in the Boston Museum. The Boston Museum had a fire in 1899, and all that material came to the Peabody. It's a big collection, including that mermaid that we saw, that mermaid from Fiji. We called it 9912. It was the 12th accession of the year 1899. That mermaid was collected on the United States exploring expedition of 1837. And again, we worked very, very closely with Butch Thunderhawk in this exhibition, and it's hard to see in the slide, but that's a calumet, it's a peace pipe, and Butch designed the enclosure. And the only thing I should say about this is these were all of these objects that Lewis and Clark collected at this time were the result of formal diplomatic relations. They had a great influence on the kind of things that people subsequently collected, but Lewis and Clark calumet was something that was given to Lewis and Clark in a formal diplomatic exchange with the American nation. And just to give you an idea, the one thing that always fascinates me is how quickly information is lost, even in museums. And this is a bear claw necklace. This is one of the best documented Lewis and Clark objects, and until 2005, this was in oceanic storage and said whale bone, necklace made out of whale bone. So we have a huge collection of African material. On the left is a beautiful Benin plaque, and on the right is one of the finest Kubu masks in the world. And the reason I really want to show this is that these are absolutely beautiful objects, and it's really been my pleasure to work very closely with this collection for a really long time. But I think you may be noticing, these are all out of context. And even now, when you go to presentations by scholars about Benin bronzes, the aesthetics of them, or the Kuba mask, the Benin bronzes were all made available for sale after the punitive raids of the 1890s by the British Army. They decided in the 1890s that they were kind of finished hassling with the Royal Court of Benin about competing over the palm oil business. So they sort of trumped up a massacre and then went in and destroyed the entire kingdom and distributed these thousands of beautiful plaques that some of them date back to the 1300s. We have a big collection of material from Oceania. These are two objects from Easter Island. It's a famous tapa figure on the left, and on the right is a carving, and a lot of the Easter Island material is definitely depicting a famine situation. These are Malangan masks. These are from New Ireland. This is my favorite kind of ethnographic material, and this is, there was a lot of these cultures very, very concerned with properly passing their ancestors on to the afterlife, and so important people would commission enormous numbers of artwork in order to celebrate or to commemorate the death of a loved one. And there's an interesting kind of copyright issue with these, because a big man in one of these cultures would commission a huge amount of artwork, and then the artist wouldn't be able to make that anymore. And it got a little bit weird when people started buying these things. They're supposed to be just used for one ceremony and then taken out in the woods and degrading. And there's a lot of material in museums like the Peabody that was supposed to be kind of returned to the earth and is now being held in stasis. And these are some shields. It's a shield from the Trobriand Islands, and then two Osmond objects, an Osmond figure and a Osmond shield. And these three objects were collected by Michael Rockefeller in the early 1960s. And whenever we can, we work with contemporary artists. And this is a contemporary Australian photographer, really brilliant photographer named Stephen DuPont, who spends quite a bit of time photographing in Papua New Guinea. And we were able to organize an exhibition on the 50th anniversary of a very, very important ethnographic film, the first film made by the Harvard Film Studies Center in 1963 of the Danny, called Dead Birds. I remember seeing it in 5th grade. And anyway, so 50 years later, we were able to fund Stephen DuPont to go back to Papua New Guinea and photograph the same people. And of course, they have all kinds of problems with gang violence and drugs and other kinds of things now. And this is hard to see, but this is an exhibition that we opened recently called The Arts of War. And that's a big concrete wall that has a sort of big blown out section. And this is a pan-cultural exhibition that we organized in order to explore the idea of people decorating objects that they take with them into deadly situations. And so we have material from all the collections that are represented. The only kind of material we don't really have in the Peabody is European material, and that would have ended up at one of the other repositories at the university. And speaking of all that violence, I'm also a sculptor. And I even had a show at the Art Association. So the story of the exhibition really, I think, begins, I should say, grew up in the Susan Glaspell house, was always vaguely aware of this kind of history, but I think the beginning of our story really begins with Stephen Borkowski purchasing a collection of glass plate negatives in 1995, I think. And in researching them, realizing that they had been used to illustrate a newspaper article that came out the summer of 1916, in August of 1916, the Boston Globe magazine declared Provincetown the biggest art colony in the world. And Stephen eventually transcribed the entire article, and this is the cover of it. And we don't want to finish reading that. And it was, just these absolutely beautiful. Here's a student of George Elmer Brown painting on Nickerson Street. And this is a really interesting image. I'm sorry you can't see it, but there's a banner hanging there that's advertising the Art Association exhibition in Town Hall. So we know that in 1916 the Art Association didn't have their exhibition, their museum space yet, and they held the first several annual exhibitions in Town Hall. The other thing that we keyed off in developing the exhibition was a really beautiful essay written by the artist Marsden Hartley that it's unpublished, but the Beinecke Library, it's at the Beinecke Library at Yale, and called The Great Provincetown Summer, and that's where the title of the exhibition comes from. This is a drawing of Marsden Hartley by Alfred Stieglitz, and a lot of people that I talk to think of Marsden Hartley and think of his landscapes from coastal Maine, but this is the work that I really always thought of when I thought of Marsden Hartley. And he was a key figure, invited to spend the summer of 1916 in Provincetown by Jack Reed. And this is a photograph also that Stephen came up with that, I mean, this must be in the archive of the Art Association. But anyway, of the 1916 Art Association costume ball. And I should let Stephen tell his own stories, but in doing research, in finding this banner article about the 1916 costume ball, he realized that Marsden Hartley, who's standing second from left, was awarded a prize for best costume as an East Indian. And the other thing that, and Stephen may have even done a presentation about this, but this photograph apparently was very, very helpful when they were thinking about how to do the town hall restoration. So even though I grew up in the Susan Glaspell house and was vaguely aware of the history of the theater and I really, really enjoyed reading all about it, I thought from the beginning that I would actually invite an O'Neill scholar to work on that part of the exhibit with me. And this is Jeff Kennedy. I met Jeff Kennedy, I think, through Stephen last summer. He emailed me and asked if we could arrange a visit, if he could bring a group of people to my parents' house. And then we met at a conference session, and he's been studying the Provincetown players for the past 20 years and is entirely responsible for all the content about the Provincetown players in the exhibition. And this is Jim Bacher. So the second thing I thought of was there's absolutely no way I'm doing this exhibition without Jim Bacher, and Jim Bacher is a really tremendous resource, and he was absolutely lovely and helped me with an enormous number of things, and was just generous with his time and great, and someone that knows an enormous amount about this history. And one day he sent me a PDF of this exhibition catalog from the second annual exhibition of 1916. And the interesting thing about this particular copy is that it was the personal copy of Abby Cook Putnam, who's pictured there on the left. You probably know she was the longtime town librarian, and this is actually the installation of that show at Town Hall. And she made notes in the margins about artists. And so you can see that, yeah, so of William and Marguerite Zorach, she wrote, "Awful, rotten, all freaks, so-called modernist school of art, prehistoric, a better name, I think." And sort of surprised Ambrose Webster got it good. But Oliver Chaffee, one of the artists, Chaffee was actually one of the 4 artists in Provincetown that had work at the Armory show in New York. He got a rotten. And Edwin Dickinson is no good. So I also want to talk about Nappy Van Derek. Nappy was enormously generous with his time and helpful, and Nappy has put together a collection of Provincetown art that is one of the great treasures of this town and is going to be treasured for generations to come. And he was amazingly generous in talking about the history of the town and in lending work to the exhibition. And this is the William Housel painting of Rose Dorothea, the winner of the Lipton Cup. And I honestly think the exhibition is worth visiting just to see this painting. It's an absolutely beautiful painting. The thing that's really interesting about Nappy's collection to me is that a lot of it was collected very, very specifically because of the way that it depicts the evolution of the waterfront and waterfront industries. But there are very, very few towns in the world where you could have a collection that was collected, put together with that kind of focus, where there's absolutely no compromise whatsoever in the quality of the work. And this is if I talk about publications a little bit, this is the catalog from the Tides of Provincetown exhibition, which was organized by the New Britain Museum of Art. And this is something that Stephen Workowski was very involved with organizing. There are essays by Christine McCarthy, Jim Bacher, Josephine Del Deo, and interesting thing the curator of the exhibition was really a kid at the time named Alexander Noel. This was an enormously helpful resource for me. It was organized to celebrate seminal moments in the history of Provincetown art, and in and of itself was really a seminal moment. And I think, the early stages of thinking about the exhibition, I think it was very, very disorganized, and I think even Stephen was having serious doubts, but the day I showed up at his house with this book, he threw the floodgates open, and we went to visit the town art collection. And on the left is a Mary Bacon Jones, and on the right, obviously, is a Blanche Chazelle. The Mary Bacon Jones is one of my favorite pieces in the whole show. It's an absolutely beautiful little print. And Mary Bacon Jones lived in the house that Romolo Del Deo lives in now. Obviously, this was an important book as well for me, Figures in Landscape by Josephine Del Deo. The first 3 or 4 chapters in the book are actually written by Ross Moffat. It's really an amazing volume. And the single most intimidating experience I had was visiting with Sal and Josephine Del Deo, under the auspices of doing an exhibition about the history of art in Provincetown. And I have to say they were absolutely lovely with me, and Josephine was so nice about just giving me confidence to kind of focus on part of the exhibition that I was interested in. And it was really, I really can't tell you how nice they were, and how fun it was to visit with them. And one of the really fun days of the exhibition was one very, very cold day in February. Romolo and I drove out to the Del Deo's Dune Shack, they call Frenchie Shack, to collect these 2 chairs. I knew they had chairs that were pulled out of the the Second Wharf building during a fire by the police chief. They had really interesting programs, but I never expected them to be such amazingly interesting looking chairs. And they lent these to the exhibition so you can see them if you go. And obviously, Art in Narrow Streets is an amazing resource written by Ross Moffat about the first 3 or 4 decades of the Art Association. And on the right is Provincetown Painters by Dorothy Gies Seckler. Provincetown Painters, 1890 to 1970 it's called, and a book that I borrowed from the library here, and that's really a great resource. And I actually brought it back to renew it, and there was a hold that was placed on it. They were very nice. They said it didn't really matter. It was a person from Wellfleet, but it was Maura Coughlin, who was organizing the exhibition at the Art Association. So I said, no, let's let Maura have the book for a while. I've had it for a few weeks. And because I didn't get one from Harvard, then I went back and it turned out that she had gotten the one from Harvard. So this copy belongs to the Pilgrim Monument. And obviously, the other thing I should say is that if these are photographs that any of you have taken, please just raise your hand if you want credit for them. I think this photograph was taken by Debbie Minsky. But obviously, Christine McCarthy at the Art Association and Jim Zimmerman were really a great help to me. They lent an absolutely amazing painting to the exhibition, a Charles Hawthorne painting, and Jim Zimmerman has the photographic archives at the library. At the Art Association was really, really helpful and supplies with a huge number of scans, images. So this is one of them. So this is a classic historic photo of Charles Hawthorne painting, demonstrating how to paint the mud. Had his models got the parasol. This is an image that you can see at the exhibition. It's particularly interesting to me because just in the more, kind of in the immediate background is the barge used to set the pilings for the whole weir fishing kind of, industry, which is a big thing. And there's a gorgeous model describing this entire process up at the monument, the trap fishing industry. And then in the background are like 5 battleships. Just huge battleships. Obviously, Porter Walker lent us a beautiful Martin Hartley. It was really, really supportive and absolutely lovely to work with around all winter. Really, really fun and great to visit with. And then this is a book called, I think maybe the first time I met with John McDonough, he gave me this book, Provincetown From Pilgrim Landing to Gay Resort by Karen Krahulik. And Karen Krahulik contributed an element of the exhibition that talks about the genesis of the gay scene, and that's an image, Marguerite Zorak woodblock image that we used to illustrate that panel. It was recently given by Natalie and Helen Van Derek to the Art Association, and this really does, when you're kind of wondering how Provincetown got this way in a lot of different ways, the story does go back to 1916. She writes really eloquently about confirmed bachelors and maiden ladies, and Marsden Hartley and Charles Demuth, and the printmakers probably that Bill's going to talk about. And really my favorite figure in the entire kind of history of all this stuff is Mary Heaton Boris, and this slide was in the presentation before this weekend. But I think she was just an extraordinary, extraordinary person who, I think this is, I wish I could find her in this photograph, but if this is a photograph taken in 1915 on board the ship that's going to the International Peace Delegation at The Hague, and she's representing 150,000 women from the state of New York on that trip, and I think it's just, illustrative how, I'm sure many of you know more about Mary Heaton Boris than I do, but she was really a very, very important labor journalist and war correspondent, and someone that played a major role kind of on the world stage. And I think, the book Time in the Town is really the greatest book I've written about Provincetown. And I realized one of the things I just love about it is just how much she loved living in Provincetown, that she came to Provincetown and she immediately recognized it as a place that she wanted to make her home. And she kept a sailboat and knew how to fix it and knew how to sail. And but at the same time was going back and forth to Europe and other places, participated in and covered all the important labor strikes in the country, supported an entire extended family on her own writing. This is 5 years before women had to vote in this country. This is the book Time in the Town. This is Bill Evaul. I know he'd be sitting here, but I wanted to show a picture of him. And, Bill, I got to know Bill working on this project, and this is Bill speaking kind of emphatically and convincingly about something, which is to the way I think of him. And Bill was really, really helpful to me in understanding a lot of the history of the art colony, and especially in pulling together the part about the Beachcombers Club, which we want to represent, of course, because we know that was founded in 1916, and even more material to our point, it was founded by the same people. It was founded by Charles Hawthorne and George Elmer Brown and E. Ambrose Webster and all the same figures that were involved with all the other things that were happening at that time. The first conversation I ever had with Bill was about this painting by Nordfeld, George J.O. Nordfeld, which had at one time been owned by the Art Association but had been deaccessioned. And he was working on tracking it down. I think this is just an amazing, amazing painting. And we have a reproduction of it in the exhibition, which you can see. And it's on the cover of this book, Cultural Moment, which I'm sure most of you have. It's written and edited by Adele Heller's mother. And this is the, I hope all of you got to see the show. This is an installation shot of the Beachcombers exhibition that was organized, that opened in March at the Art Association and was curated by Maura Coughlin and Toby Everett. And I think Bill Evaul worked very, very hard in this show as well. This was an absolutely fantastic show, showing the early history of Beachcombers artists. And they have a really, really great exhibition catalog. There's an essay by Bill Evaul, there's an essay by Sebastian Younger, and there's an essay by Maura Coughlin. And this, Bill Evaul provided the only contemporary art that's in the exhibition. He made 3 brand new woodblock prints, paintings really, of Susan Glassbolt, pictured here, and another one of Jake Cook, and another one of Eugene O'Neill. Absolutely fabulous pieces. And this is our craft designer, Hans Inlees, who worked very, very closely with me on all this. And this is the exhibition that we all created together. And I guess you can't read that, but that's the acknowledgements. So, thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions for Sam? I mean, we've traveled 100 years, right? Maybe afterwards. I just want to also let you know that since he brought up Josephine Del Deo, that Josephine will be receiving the Rose Dorothea Award here at the library on Friday, September 16th. And without further ado, Billy.
Actually, I just want to say, I wanted to donate. I've got a copy of the Lakota War book from Little Bighorn. I want to donate to the library.
Yay! Thank you very much.
Well, it was great, Sam, and it was a great pleasure working with you on this project. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the white line woodcut. I guess you probably mostly already know most everything about it now. You're the ones that are interested, and so you're here. The ones that don't know aren't here. So it's kind of preaching to the choir. But I'll tell you one thing that was interesting is I'll tell you a little bit about how I got into it. Some of you might have heard that story before, but I was working at Pratt in New York, and I was teaching assistant in lithography, and I was writing for Print Review magazine. And I did mostly interviews and reviews of shows and things like that. And but I was always still coming back to Provincetown, so that my editor, Andrew Stasik, he said, oh, when you go back to Provincetown, why don't you do a story on printmaking? And then he said, but you know, I've never heard of any printmaking there, and maybe there wasn't any. You know, we know about the painters, Hawthorne and Hoffman and everybody else. So if you don't find anything about printmaking, then go interview Bob Motherwell, because we know he makes prints. And that'll make a good story. And I said, great, I can do that. I know Bob from the work center, and so everything was fine. When I came back, I went to visit Myron Stout, the way I always would. And we were just talking about anything and everything. And he says, well, what are you up to this? And I said, well, I got this, I'm writing for a print review. And I got to do a story on printmakers and printmaking. I know John Gregory had a litho press, and he did a few lithos for himself and for Dorothy Lake Gregory, and maybe some Ross Moff. He did some for Ross, but that was pretty much all I knew. And he said, "Oh, he told me about Blanche Lazelle and that whole world." And he had known several of those people. He knew Blanche personally. He knew Ada Gilmore and a few of the others. So it's kind of fitting that we're here directly across the street from Blanche's studio, where most likely that print was made, 100 years ago. And she loved to write about how her little studio was in the shadow of this place. But now it's reversed. We're in her shadow. So anyway, I wrote this little history. He pointed me in a few different directions. Farrell Warthen for one, and she was about the only living person who actually made prints. But I wasn't even interested in making them, and I was writing this story. So I finished my story, sent it in to Print Review. They sat on it for 2 years. I caught wind of Mervyn Jules and Nat Halper. Many of you probably remember those guys. And somehow they had discovered a cache of prints in an estate sale or something. And there was tons of white line woodcuts in it. They didn't call them white line woodcuts then. They didn't know what to call them. They called them Provincetown prints back in the day. And then now they were just like collecting dust in somebody's attic. But Jules and Halper knew that they were onto something. They just knew it. And so rather than just turn them over like they normally would, as dealers would, they said, what we need is a museum show to put these things on the map, and of course to boost the value. They weren't too shabby. So they invited Janet Altec Flint from the National Museum of American Art in Washington, D.C., and she is already an expert in American color woodcuts. That's her field, and she is the go-to person for this. And she was delighted to accept the job, and she put on a great exhibition which opened here in Provincetown and then traveled to Washington, D.C. And that basically ripped the lid off the white line woodcut market.
When was that, Bill? When was
That was in '84. Yeah, 1984. I wrote my essay in '79. And I don't know why they didn't publish it. They kept bumping off. I said, publish that thing now because you can scoop Janet Flint. No, they weren't interested by then. But they did publish it anyways. But what happened was that show set off a firestorm amongst collectors. You guys remember that. You were in the ground zero for it. Sort of get to watch it. We've heard a lot about Nappy Van Derrick. At that time, I was running a little art gallery for him upstairs in his restaurant where he wanted to expand the restaurant, and town wouldn't let him have a restaurant, so he had an art gallery. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, Billy, yeah, I'm working as a carpenter. Oh, yeah, aren't you an art? Yeah, you can run the gallery. So I'll pay you to build the gallery, and the minute you're done, you're on your own. But you collected, I won't take the commission. And he was laughing. He's going to suffer. But I sold over $30,000 of artwork that summer. And he took notice of that. And then that was right around when he started collecting. And so I remember sitting in the gallery on a hot summer day while he was out on his catamaran with his waitresses, and I would get all the art dealers, who are coming there. They heard the word. There's this crazy man in Provincetown. He's going to pay anything for anything that has Provincetown in it. And so they were coming down left and right, and so I got to meet lots of dealers and everything, and it was very good for my historical research down the road, because these guys are very knowledgeable too. And this one guy brought in a Blanche Lozelle pile driver. Used to be in, the town has one, a copy of it, don't they? No?
No, yeah.
Well, all right. Anyways, the guy brings it in. He said, "Nappy here?" No, he's out. He said, "Well, I'm gonna leave it." He said, "I don't know if he wants it, nobody else wants it." This was before the show, or right before the show. And the guy said, he wants $350 for it. "I'm going to leave it here. I'll come back in September. If he doesn't want it, I'll take it back, So Nappy came back and he looked at it. He said, "Oh, $350 for a print? Are you crazy?" "No, I don't know." He just put it up in his office, and he looked at it all summer long, and it turned out that he had a pretty damn good summer at the restaurant that year, and $350 didn't seem so bad, and so he bought it. Now, the next year or 2 years later, I take a job at the Art Association, and I'm working there, and we're trying to do these auctions, where you get artists to donate their lifeblood, and then people come and buy it for no money, and then they undercut the artists and the galleries, and each year it gets worse and worse, and the organization gets less and less, and so eventually I'm saddled with, how do we raise money for this damn place? And Nappy was on the board at the time, and I had known Jim Bacher from Cambridge even before he moved to Newbury Street, because he was doing a lot of antique work then, and I worked with him on some of the art things that he was doing. Anyways, so Nappy said, "Let's bring Jim to Provincetown. Let's have an auction that's a consignment auction. Well, people will get money back. That's what will bring in the good artwork." And sure enough, he was right. And that auction continued today, and twice a year, and it's been copied, everything. It brings in a lot of money, and it's a very good source for collectors to deaccession and acquire, and it brings out new work, and so it was a good thing in the end, I think, but And then no living people too, that's the other good thing. So, but that's getting them. So anyway, the print that Nappy bought for $350, like in '84 or '85, like 2 years later, it went to $14,000. And then everybody was going, oh, that's the record, that's the record. And then a year later, boom, it goes up higher and higher. All of a sudden, the record kept getting broken and broken. The prices kept climbing. The collectors came out of the woodwork. The dealers scoured the earth, literally. They went to all over the country. They looked up death records of relatives. They ferreted it out, all kinds of important artwork. And now you blanch this out. What's that? 200,000 anyway. So next time a guy comes and offers you a print for $350, you can. Now, so the way I got into it was not because I was interested in making prints like this. I was fine painting and I was fine doing lithography, and but I got invited to the Sween School of Design to give a talk on printmaking, on the article that I wrote, and I thought, well, how am I going to walk into a room full of artists to tell them, and me being an artist, tell them about something that I haven't done? I couldn't do that, so I said, I better quick figure this out. Well, by then, Farrell was back in Washington. I didn't even think to talk to her about it. I had to deconstruct it for myself, and I did. And what happened? And so that little talk turned into a little demonstration workshop, and I got hooked on it. And the rest is history. So now I get invited to do a demonstration at the Art Association with Farrell Werther. And that was a great honor. Farrell and I became, the way we got reunited is something interesting. That I forgot about that part. When I was doing Nappy's little show, and I had my very, very first show of woodcuts, small little things, not too many of them. And it was a two-person show with Bruce McCain paintings. Like he was like propping me up, and I was here. I was really honored, and it was a great thing. And so we had a little ad in the paper, a tiny little ad, said Bruce McCain paintings, Bill Evaul Provincetown prints. I was still calling them Provincetown prints. The dealers and all, and the museum people changed the name to White Line Woodcut because they don't really like Provincetown all that well in the commercial. I mean, they like it, but they don't want to go there. And they don't want it to kill any sales either, so like. Anyway, so she and I gave this print demonstration, and I learned a lot about demonstrating from her because I'm all worried about it. Now I know all these little fine details. I bring all this equipment, tons of paint, all these brushes and everything, and I get really like lathered up, and I'm telling you about it. And she goes, "Oh, it's nothing. You just take your block, and here's a block, and you pin your paper on it, and then if you have some paint, you just have a little paint here, right? And then of course it's watercolor paint, so." And you don't need a brush, you just need one good brush. So it's really, really quite simple. Oh yeah, you need something your grandmother's silver spoon. Sterling silver. Shouldn't be a hotel plate or anything like that, because that makes all the black marks on the back of the paper, when the oxide rubs off. I learned that going out to dinner with my parents. And I found that the spoons would make beautiful silver point marks on the linen white tablecloth. But, so you use the silver spoon, and you just paint. get it in the wrong place, you just... Now, the thing about this is, everybody thinks, oh, wow, you just paint the block and then you print it, right? But no, it's starting to dry already. So, you can't do the whole thing all at once. So, you have to do piece. And, of course, you do have to remember that everything's in reverse. So, now, 9,000 more pressings and we got a full color print. So, that's enough about white line woodcut. Do you have any questions? Yes?
Yeah. Do you do one color at a time all over, or do you work sort of from the top down, or doesn't it matter?
I've tried all of those. I read that Pizarro painted from the top down, just like, and I thought, that's really wiggy, man. How could you do that? I tried it a couple times. No. And then, but I like to work all over. That's the way I would learn to paint. You know, you put a dab here, well, it affects what's going on over here. Or that. So, like, I like to work all over. The problem with that is remembering where you put the paint. And also, you know, we're one of the only weird sets of humanity that actually loves humid days, because we get a lot more dry. Today is a very dry day, and it just sucks it right up. But, yeah. What else? Yes?
About how many prints do you get off of one block?
Well, that's a good question, because we get that all the time. It's, you get, okay, so I started this now. If I were going to dedicate myself to this block, I could probably finish it in 3 or 4 days. But I'm usually not dedicated to one block, you know, because I've made over 300 blocks by now, and I keep thinking of new ideas, and plus I keep painting and drawing too, and other things, and so you only do one at a time. And then what happens is you want to make another one, but by then you're so over this. You don't want to see it again for a while. And so you're on to something else. So now maybe a week later or a year later or 5 years later you go back and make another one. Or if somebody wants one special. Or maybe you get a great idea. Oh, that shouldn't be a red boat, that should be a blue boat, you know. And, well, then you can do that. So in the course of a lifetime of a white line woodblock printer, you know, maybe I've been doing this now since 81 or so. So probably 15 prints is the most I've gotten out of any one block, but more likely it's 5 or fewer. Sometimes on a few blocks just one print because, man, I still have it, I like it. I haven't sold it, and so I don't need another one. But, you know, yes.
So the paint is never really fully dry on the block?
Oh, well, now, every time you make a print, you have to re-ink it or repaint it.
Okay.
So the paint that's on the color that's on this block now is just residual color from a prior printing. And, you know, there's still some there, so like I'll do a little demonstration about, I'll just put some plain water on an area and see if we'll pull out some of the color from. So you have to know that this will happen the second time, and that third or fourth time you make a print. So if you're going to keep the same color scheme, then it's fine. Then you're kind of like a leg up on it. And if you want to change the color scheme, then you have to know that that's going to bleed into your new color and modify it, and maybe you want that. Maybe that could be really nice. Or if you don't want it, like say I wanted to make that blue and yellow, I'd have to scrub the block from the residual color, and then you could. And you could. What did I do with that spoon?
Hands pocket on the left.
Thank you. See, so now there's some color left over, but that's not really enough to make it look right. So I'll go back over with another layer of color, maybe 3, 4, 5 layers. Maybe I'll layer up 2 or 3 different colors, you know, to make a kind of a core. So that's the way that works. So usually there's just 3 to 5 prints out of one block.
And is the first print always the most valuable, the best?
Well, that's for the market to decide. I think, you know, it depends, because usually, yeah, that's the one that has all the expression. Like, I've been passionately working towards that. I made the drawings first, I did all the carving, and now, and so all through that, I'm thinking about the colors, and so.
So I guess a 1 of 5, 1 should be the most valuable.
Well, now, okay, the numbering system's important. Let's see. In fact, this is a very good place to give my addition lecture. So I came out of a tradition of working at a print shop and teaching lithography and for traditional printmaking. And if you're a printer and you're working for somebody else, your job is to make a perfect print. That's it. So what happens, the artist comes in, he usually comes in with a dealer with a big checkbook, and the artist is being paid by the dealer to make the blocks or the plates or the stones or whatever they are. And the artist works in collaboration with the printers and the technicians, because, you know, there's a lot of chemistry and technical know-how that goes into printmaking. So they'll do that image, and the printers make the proofs. So you have trial proofs and all this, and then they put them up, and then the artist says, that's the one, that's the one. That's the BAT, B-A-T, bon naturel, good to pull. Okay, you put that on the wall in the print shop, and the artist goes back to the bar. I was going to say home, but when do they ever go straight home? Then the artists say, the printers say, the dealer says, I want an edition of 100, and then I want 2 prints to give to this museum, and I want 2 prints to give to that museum, and then the printers get to keep 2 prints, and the artist gets artist proofs, generally 10% of the edition. So in this case, if there's 100 prints, the artist will get 10 artist proofs. Now, then the printers, so they're going to make 100 plus 2, you know, you do the math, and so now, and then there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be glitches. So if they're going to, we'll probably print 150 pieces of paper, and then they go to curating, and there's a curating person who looks at every single one, and they have to be identical. And if they're not identical, they get destroyed. Okay, and at the end of the day, the dealer gets his 100 prints, which he owns and he sells. The artist gets his 10% artist proofs, which he owns and he can't sell, because he doesn't know how to, but he tries, and he complains about it back at the bar. And the museums get their HCs, or commerce, out of trade, you know, commerce. Now, that's an edition, a group of prints that are identical. These are monoprints. That means mono means one, and print means something similar. So the carving is the print part, and the coloration is the mono part. Monotype would be if I just painted and there were no carving, and then you printed it. And you can have monoprints on metal plates or collagraphs or other types of wood blocks. So that's why I don't number them, because the second print is going to be, even if I try to make it the same, it's going to be a little different. And if I don't make it the same, it can be way different. But so, now there's some artists that say, well, it's a varied edition. well, then you can call it a varied edition if you want. Yeah, but then, you know, like, you're not going to get a job at Solar Press if you're going to allow prints that aren't identical to be called in this, you know. So that's the yeah. But the reason that idea that you presented, Dolores, is that it's true that, especially with say dry point, where that burr, which captures the ink and wiping, and it has such a beautiful tone, that does get mashed down after time, and so the prints do degrade, and so the lower numbers tend to have higher values because they're more true. And then also with European prints and old master prints, they have restripes all the time, and the plates do degrade after a while. But I'm not going to live long enough to degrade these wood blocks. Yeah.
So, Bill, when you having a show?
It opens July 1st, and the reception is Friday, July 8th at the Provincetown Art Association and Museum. Yeah, so please come. It's up through August 21st.
The blocks themselves, are there many Blanche Lazelle blocks? Are there
Oh, yeah.
those been found? And
Oh yeah. And they're highly collectible too, and they're also stratospheric prices now.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
If many of those have been found.
It's interesting. What's the tradition? You know, like, I mean, are you going to cancel it? Like traditionally, like if you were doing an edition, you cancel the plates at the end so nobody could do restrike. So maybe they'll scratch it out or drill a hole or something like that. But I'm not doing that to these things because they look too good just by themselves, and nobody's going to dare try to reprint them. Would they? I'll be dead, I don't care. But the point is, what do you do in the end? So Carl Canas, who was very, very close with Agnes Weinrich, when Agnes died, he varnished all the blocks so that nobody could print them. And well, that would prevented people from printing them, but it also turned them yellow. That was a double-edged sword there. And one of my students, Philippe Villard, who is now in Maine and has done very well with white line woodcut, he cancels his block by filling the grooves with white grout. So, and then, you know, so the blocks look like white line prints, but you couldn't print them. And then he sells the blocks. Yeah. He's doing well. But yeah. So that's
For a wood block, for a block that size, how long did it take you to do all the carving?
well. Carving is a chore. It's work. It's a skill. It depends on the complexity. I could probably carve a block like this in 3 or 4 days. The giant ones take 4 months. You know, I could do a little one, you know, in a day. You know, most of the medium-sized ones take a week or 2 weeks or something, you know. Yeah.
You can't erase.
But
You can't erase a mistake if you slip with that knife.
mistakes are there to be made, and we make them all the time. But this trick is how to fix it. When I used to work as a carpenter with Bruce Dealey, he says, it's not a mistake if you fix it. So there are tricks to fixing things, but at any stage. But we try to avoid that. We learn by making a couple mistakes, and then you become more careful. So you're talking about the carving, but you know, to get to the carving, you have to have a drawing or a painting or an image. You have to have an image. So the hardest part of the whole process is having an image. What am I going to paint today? You know. And
When do you get most of your images?
Well, the best ones come when I'm asleep and dreaming. And, but meanwhile, I'm going through daily life with my sketchbook and I'm sketching all the time. And then you go back and you look and then you say, oh, there was something there. And then you can work, you pick it out and you work with it. Once in a while you get a specific assignment, like I had with Tennessee Williams project, where like, I want you to have this and this and this, and it has to have this in it, and it has to have that in it. And I said, okay, I can do it. And then you just draw 10 drawings that all have those things in it until it starts to feel right. So you're getting, you know, or other situations where you have a lot of prep work to do. So there's anywhere from 1 to 20 drawings for each block, and sometimes a painting or two. So then you got now you've got your image, and then you have to redraw it in reverse on the wood, because as we know, it comes out in mirror image, and that's tricky too. So, especially if you're going to do lettering. Like I made a print of Boston skyline, and I was putting in Fenway Park, and I got the green monster there and the big scoreboard, and I was so excited. I'm going to play this trick. It's going to be a tiny little spot in the print, and maybe somebody's not going to notice it, but people notice it. Look, the score: Boston 10, New York E. No, 3. Yeah, that's what happens when you get too invested in your work. You have to be dispassionate and detached, and then everything will be fine.
Right field.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start out by talking about the Sail-Off Club. I am as passionate about the Sail-Off Club as a lot of women are about the beachcombers. Blanche Lascelles was one of the presidents. But what are we even talking about? The Sail-Off Club was a group of women artists that gathered together for social reasons. The Beachcomber Club was a men's art group that gathered together for social reasons. They both started in 1916. Why? Well, they were all hanging out in Europe before, and when they went to the coastal towns of Brittany and, you know, Bonavent and all those places where they had little villages of fishermen and like nice little inns and places to eat and pensions and all that, well, they got used to going out and working during the day and then coming back and sharing ideas with each other and sharing dinner and food, and then some of the places had formalized clubs, and so that was a milieu that they were really enamored of before they came back to America. So I'm quite certain that those ideas, whether consciously or just subconsciously, went into the formation of these two clubs, Sail-Loft Beachcombers. And so, unfortunately for all of us, the Sail-Loft Club went out of business, or whatever you call it. They disappeared. And, you know, who knows what the reasons are. I think it was real estate. Because it was so easy to rent places here in that day. You know, you could get a whole wharf building for $50 a year or something, you know. Stay there as long as you can, you know. And so the Beachcombers' first clubhouse was, Nappy knows exactly where it is, you know, but I think it might have been Pearl Street or Johnson Street, somewhere around there. There's a great Garrett Benneker painting of it. And, but then, for some reason I'm not quite sure of, I think it was damaged in the storm, there was a couple other possible reasons, they were forced to find a different place. And it became became obvious that it was cheaper to buy than rent. In those days, there was a rigging loft that had a fire in it. It was abandoned, empty, except for the little plumber's forge or something. And so they bought that building for no money, you know, and cut it in half and dragged it along shore before it fell off into the pier, because they weren't going to fix that pier. And but they did fix the building, save the building, and then that gave them a raison d'etre to survive. So they had to recruit new people and raise money and pay taxes and maintenance and repairs, and so that held the club together. And I think, you know, the women's kind of just drifted away somehow. They didn't get reseated, but yeah. So that's the Beachcombers. And like Sam said, all this cast of characters are all the same. They're all interlocking. They all did, you know, they all started everything here. There was nothing else going on, so they had to create it. You know, you couldn't do that today because there's tons of bars, there's tons of nightclubs, there's tons of theaters, there's tons of, you know, shows, and everything's competing for your attention. Then there was nothing going on, so they had to make it all up themselves. So, and they did a pretty damn good job of it too. All right.